We're ready whenever you are, sir.
All right. Turn it around just so that I can see if it's actually capturing. Oh, no, wait, it's got it flipped. No wonder. Okay, then I've got to do it this one.
It's gonna be live, it's gonna be live.
Yes, it's gonna be live on the museum website. I think you're doing this from YouTube, right?
Yes, and eventually it'll be re-uploaded onto a different channel once I get everything down there. So. Okay.
He's got the projector. Right.
You got the microphone right
Man, you can get ahead like
Are you
that.
good?
Yeah.
No, you just put, you don't have to go in all the way, that's right there, it's fine.
All right.
You need to stand back here or stand over here, whatever.
I should probably.
Oh, you're fine. It's like, I don't want to trip on that.
Oh, yes, that's true.
You're looking off camera.
Well, the edge of camera is about the railroad crossing sign.
Well, I've got my camera on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, you're in now, we'll let you know.
All right, perfect.
You ready, Priscilla? All right, hello everyone, welcome to the Cleburne Museum. Just for reference, the mic is not for you, the mic is for our live stream, for our live audience who will be joining us. We'd like to introduce James. Remind me how the pronunciation goes again?
Just James is fine.
Just James, okay. He can tell you his action if he wants to. I first met James, I think it was last month, going on the Grapevine all the way to the Stockyards in Fort Worth. Instantly, he was very knowledgeable about the Interurban. Anyone that can hold a conversation with my dad for more than the 4 or 3 hour train wait that we were waiting for knows his stuff. So I asked him to come by and give you a little talk about it, and I'm looking forward to what he's going to bring it forth to y'all. And without any further ado, take it away.
All right, thank you, Nick. All right, so for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm James, and a lot of people ask me, how did you actually learn about the Interurban? Did you have a family member who worked on it? Did you work at the museums? Did you help preserve equipment? No. My interest solely came from when I used to work over at the McKinney Avenue Transit Authority, and I had seen these pictures of this gigantic blue streetcar, or at least I thought it was a streetcar at the time. And they told me, no, that's an Interurban car, and then I asked the question, what the heck is an Interurban? Because that just sounds like a streetcar, but with extra steps. It's not. So, to give a brief definition of what an Interurban is, it follows basically the same lines as a regular railroad does. The only difference is that when it goes into the city, it goes directly into the city. With most towns, if you got a regular steam railroad going through at the time, they would be on the outskirt of the town. Why? Because they didn't want to go directly in, because then the railroads would have to pay the town's taxes on any goods coming in or out, or any services. And they didn't like that. They'd rather the towns pay them taxes for their own goods, so they had their own property to do that. Now, this is the accumulative knowledge of just 2 years of what I've been studying in terms of the history of the Interurban. If I can get this to... Is it actually... It's just making a noise. I don't think it's supposed to do that.
Do you want me to take a look?
All right, so right up ahead, so which companies are we going to be talking about? So this is one of the biggest questions that I usually get whenever I talk about the Interurban, because it wasn't just one company that built everything. It was a bunch of teeny tiny little lines kind of competing with each other before eventually one overtakes the other, another one drops out and accumulates that one, and then it turns into what we know it today. The companies back then were no different. So the main ones we're looking at are the Northern Texas Traction Company and the Fort Worth Cleburne Interurban, or the Tarrant County Traction Company. It was a subsidiary of the line. And they both operated at the same time. Northern Texas Traction was established in 1902. And its line ran all the way from Fort Worth to Dallas and then all the way down to Cleburne. And of course, right over here, we have our little timeline here, and it started its service here in Cleburne in 1917 specifically. Now, this was the passenger side of things. Right over here, we have the Tarrant County Traction Company, which is a subsidiary, and it began its life around the same time. It handled primarily all the freight on the railroads. And we'll get into the operations of where the actual line ran here in just a second. Just double check and make sure. Okay. So I tried to get this the right way up, but for some reason my phone wouldn't let me. I don't know why. But here we actually have the main line going here on North Main Street, and we can go and retrace this later outside when it's not 100 degrees out. And of course we have over here, I believe that's the street. And then right over here should be, there's the courthouse, right there, the city courthouse, which I do believe is still up today. And then we have Chambers Street right here. Now this is where we have this little section called a Y. I'm pretty sure if anyone that knows trains, they know what a Y is, but in case you don't know, it's when three lines form together to create almost a triangle. And this was so that way the cars could turn around, because only in the really early days, and I'm talking around 1899 through 1904, almost all the streetcars, or not streetcars, the interurban cars, were built double-ended, so they could go one way and then back the other. Well, as a way of cutting costs and making sure that they can save money on personnel, they went and made them single-ended. So you got a cab at one end, but not at the other. And then what happens when you get to the end of the line? You can't turn around, you can't go backwards. So they go in facing this way, back up, and then go back out the other way. Eventually they did put a loop around here. That was only in the 1920s for a little bit, and then eventually they poured that out. Now right over here we have an original Tarrant County timetable, right over here. And right up there we've got the actual advertisement. So up here you can see there's the interurban cars, huge things. And this is set up in what we call a trailer and coach configuration. So this is the main car, this is the motor car. Then behind it we have the trailer car, which is unpowered, although sometimes some of them would have a pole stuck on them to get electricity for this one as well, if that one's pole isn't working. And then of course, we've got a streetcar over here. You can see just how small that would be if you compare them side by side. And then in the middle, we've got one of our little motor cabbies. They actually had a bus service for a little bit, believe it or not, for one of the earlier ones. And one thing that a lot of people need to realize with the interurbans is that this wasn't just another rail line that ran through towns. This was another whole culture in and of itself compared to mainline railroading. And the interurbans were a little bit more personal, to put it in a more understandable way. And that is, with a mainline railroad, if you want to get something, if you want to put something on a boxcar and get it shipped out at X time to Z place out, Y reason, you have to go through miles of red tape. And the entire time, they're just sitting there. When is he going to get it here? The whole time. Meanwhile, with the interurbans, it was more of a, you went directly to the station agent and he said, okay, yeah, I'll go get George. And everybody knows who George is, right? The guy that runs the place. So you go and you get him, he comes by and he goes, oh yeah, I can get you on there for you for free. And he gets you on there and you go and do all that. And you remember that. You remember that more than taking the local all the way up to Dallas. Oh, there we go. Okay. So right over here, I don't know why that is going out right. But anyway, so what type of equipment did we run here? So this is one of the few pictures that we actually have of a car in Cleburne. There's another picture, but it's not up for public use. It's in a private collection, unfortunately, that I wasn't able to get a hold of. But this car right here is Davy Crockett. That's the name of it. Actually, we name them from time to time. And this is a very interesting car because this used to be a trailer car. The only reason I know that is because if you look behind it, it's got these little shades up here, almost just like a little roof on it. Only trailer cars had these. So this was converted at some point to be an independent unit, which also explains why its front is so flat. Usually they sort of bow out a little bit more, but this is on the direct side view and it is just flat, like someone went and cut it off. But you can still see the headlamp on it right there. And this is going down by where the courthouse is. You can actually still stand where this photo was taken. It almost looks the same. Of course, the buildings are a little different now, but it's very nice. Now, the way that the cars were built, they were built by St. Louis Car Company or the American Car Company, and they were segregated. And I know a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about the subject of segregation, in modern times and with tensions between people of different colors being very high. I think it's very prevalent, though, that we actually acknowledge the history for what it is, not for what we want it to be. And right over here, so the way that these cars are sectioned off, up here you've got the motorman, he's driving. And then the first half of the car, this would be the smoking lounge. And this is where all the white passengers would come. And then there's a double door in here, and then the rest of it is for all the blacks to sit in. And they did have little signs that actually say colored or white. You can go to the Interurban Railroad Museum over in Plano, and you can go on car 360, and that one still has its original little segregator sign on it. It's really interesting to look at. And what I find kind of funny about this, and this is an ironic kind of funny, so these cars do not have air conditioning. Your air conditioning was you lifted the windows up. Now, if you're going to be sitting up front smoking and that car's going forward the whole time, where's all that smoke going to go? It's going to go behind you into the faces of everyone at the back, which must have been absolutely horrendous to be in. But they did have little roof vents, although they didn't really work too often unless the car was going 80 or 90 miles an hour, which they almost never did. And there's actually 2 of these cars that you can go and see over, there's one over in Fort Worth at Fort Worth ITC station, and then there's another one, it's a trailer car, over in Burleson. And that one in Burleson, you can actually go inside if you go there on their days that they're open, the Visitors Bureau, and you can ask them to let you in the car, and you can go in. And now that one's segregated a little bit differently. It's got a room for men and then room for women. The women are at the front of the car, believe it or not, and the men are at the back of the car, and they've got their own little smoking lounge and everything. And one of my favorite stories that I love hearing was how they had to change the layout of the cars because the women, in order for them to use the bathrooms, which, by the way, yes, these cars had bathrooms on them. Although I don't think this one specifically had one. The only way that you can tell is there's a little window that's blacked out, and it's got a fancy circle on it that's got stained glass on it. You can't see through it, obvious reasons. And the only way that they could get to it is they'd have to go into the men's section at the back of the car. And anytime they go in there, these are guys who are smoking on their pipes, chewing their tobacco, smoking their cigarettes, or, doing all sorts of things with their cigars, and that smells dreadful. And then you have to put up with them leering at you, which they didn't like, and they complained to the president of the railroad so much that when they rebuilt them, they moved the bathroom directly to the middle of the car, so that way they wouldn't have to cross paths with each other. Next slide. So here's pictures of the cars as they are today. There's me. But here we are in Fort Worth with car number 25. This one you can't go inside of, but you can get really close to it if you know how to do that. There's a gate and everything, and the police that patrol the area are usually really friendly. If you ask, they'll just let you right in. And then right over here we have the trailer car. As you can see, it's got the same little awning on the top as the previous one did. And here's the freight motor. So this is the one that would have been operating back and forth through Cleburne most of the time, alongside these two. We actually do have written confirmation that 25 and 411 over here ran through Cleburne, which is really amazing. Now, the reason I don't have too many photos of this is because compared to these two, this car is kind of boring for most people because it's just a box car on wheels. And you've got the front, which looks cool, but then it's just solid with just a big center door in the middle. And these cars would haul all sorts of goods, mostly perishables. In fact, there are a lot of drugstores that would get most of their ice cream on the Interurban. And there's another nice, cute little story that I heard from there's a lady, I think, who still lives down near Plano, but she used to talk about her father, when he owned his drugstore back in the day, would submit an order to the office, and they would bring, the drugs and everything else on the Interurban, but they'd also get their ice cream, and they'd have to bring it in on a cart and everything. And she always talks about how during the summer they'd always ride on that little cart all the way down to the store from the station. It was very, very cute. And one thing that we'll see this car again, but it'll look a little bit different once we actually see another picture of it, so we can flip through that. So here are the cars in tandem, set up as they are right now. And you can see that the pole is at the back. A lot of people ask, well, wait a minute, if it's got two of them, why does the back one always have to be up? And that's because if you ever run a car forward, you want that to trail behind because it'll actually stay up on the wire. If you flip it around and go forward, it'll get stuck and it'll bend itself back around. I've seen that happen firsthand. It is not pretty. And also, you can see that all the boarding compartments are on the right side. They're not on the left, which is really interesting. That's also another thing that Texas Electric would eventually carry out whenever they operated their cars. And they've got these nice, beautiful arch windows and everything. It's just absolutely beautiful. Next slide. So there's 330 again, but so it's a little bit more different. It's got this little gap up here. That's what we call a clear story roof. It's got little windows in it and everything. And just behind it, you can see some of the streetcars. You can see the doors on them all open, all on a big siding. One of these cars I know is preserved today somewhere else. It wasn't a Northern Texas traction car, it's a Dallas car, which is really interesting. And this photo specifically is actually just outside of Cleburne. It's about 3 miles out of Cleburne, which was pretty amazing when I figured that out where it was stationed at. And then of course over here, another thing a lot of people tend to forget is that the Interurbans, especially back when they had started, had actually helped during the First World War transporting troops, just like all the other mainline railroads. And here's one of those advertisements from the era on it. It's actually really cool. Very hard to find in good looking enough condition to actually put up on a screen. Most of the time these pictures are so fuzzy you need like 3 pairs of glasses and you still can't see the dang things. So let's go on to the next one. So now here's the maps right over here. So what we're focusing on here is the Fort Worth to Cleburne. So that would be Tarrant County traction, but we can also see all the different lines. So from Fort Worth to Dallas is Northern Texas traction. And then up here all the way from Denison all the way down to Corsicana and Waco is all Texas Electric territory. And then over here we have Texas Interurban Railway, which went away from Denton to Terrell. And then we've got a blown up version of this little area. So this one right here. And yes, the Interurbans did run in Fort Worth. A lot of people tried to debate me as to whether they actually went into the city or not, or if it was on the outskirts. It is on the edge in some areas, but it does go all the way in a lot of other areas. And here we can see it going all the way into Cleburne, right where we are now. So give you a minute just to look at that. And feel free to ask any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer. Yes?
The main power station for the electrical line, it was in Hanley, is that correct?
Yes.
Where the, it's not the same units, of course, but where the Hanley power plant is.
Yes, that's where they were. As far as my research is guiding me, yes, that is where they are. Again, I do not know everything. I do not claim to know everything. That would be Johnny J. Myers. He's the guy who literally wrote the book on the subject. So I'd say that I'm fairly well certain in my estimates on that.
If you don't have a picture of the power plant and speed coordinates, I think I can find you one.
I definitely appreciate that. That would be much appreciated in the future. So, which I'll have to try and get, because I did try to find some photos. The only photos I could find were the plant after abandonment, which wasn't the timeline that I wanted to show.
Right.
I wanted to show it as it was.
It may be the same one.
Yeah.
I can see.
We'll have to see on that, definitely. Thank you, James. So, on to the next slide. So, end and abandonment. A lot of people always ask, why is it that these lines always are up for a very short amount of time? And that's just due to money. These things were money wasters, effectively, which is really, it's nothing short of a miracle that the Texas Electric ran till 48, for as long as it did, whereas the Northern Texas Traction, they ran out in 1935, midway through the Depression. And a lot of people ask, well, why? And it's loss of money, loss of revenue, traffic. And when the Depression had hit and the value of the dollar just kind of went, wasn't really that great. So what a lot of companies did was downsize, and then others, when they couldn't downsize any further without hemorrhaging so much money, they would either merge or they would declare bankruptcy. This is what the Interurbans did. And it actually ran up until, I believe, Christmas Day, 1935. This photo is actually in McKinney, Texas, of one of their Interurban cars. I believe that's actually the 20s, but it's the only photo I could find of one of the cars being dismantled to fit with the tone of that. And a lot of people ask what happened to the tracks. Are the tracks still available? Only in certain spots are the tracks still built, because where the Interurbans built their tracks, just use your imagination for a second. So say you've got a road here, that's your city road, and then you've got your steam train running this way, because the Interurbans ran when steam trains were still running. Dieselization didn't come until about the 50s. So in between that land is farmland most of the time, and it's very cheap. But there's one problem. It's almost impossible to get because, well, if you're a farmer and a railroad wants to buy your land, usually that means once they buy it, there you go, off to the wayside. Well, a lot of the way that the Interurban got around that was anytime that they would buy up parts of the land for the trains to go through, they would actually name that specific area after whoever they bought it from, and that would become a stop for the Interurban cars. And the way that they operated with that is they would actually have these little telephone call boxes. And they would say, oh, well, this is train 4 at Kirkland Siding. Can I go through on such and such? Because these are all single track lines. They never double track them. So then you're realizing, hey, wait a minute, I've got 5 other trains going the same way, and I'm going the opposite direction. How do you get around that? Well, they had Passover sidings. And that's basically, it's like this. You got your main line, and then you got this little snake that goes up to the edge and then connects right back up. So the car going this way pulls the siding, goes to the call box, they switch the points, and then all the other cars go through, and then once the line's clear, they call it again, switch the points, go back down, and rinse and repeat, vice versa, any which way. Let's see if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So on to the artifacts that I brought. So what you're looking at, this is a blown up version. I actually have the real thing in front in this big case over here. And I'll pass it around in a minute to show. But this is an operator's badge. So you can see on my hat, the way that usually you orient your badge is called a badge of office. So that tells us who I work for, in this case, Northern Texas Traction Company. And then you have a position badge, which is what this big part is. That tells everyone what I do, operator, or sometimes they would have train man or conductor. And this specific variant of the badges, they usually made these in silver, and they had little tags behind them so you could latch them through your hat. This is a brass gold-plated version. There were up until recently 3 of them known to exist. They're all in the collection of Johnny J. Myers. They're not out for the public to see, but there's plenty of pictures of them. I have the 4th one. And of all the places to find it at, I got it on eBay. And I know a lot of people joke, well, if you look hard enough, you can find anything on the internet, but I actually knew the guy who was selling this, and he lives all the way out in California, and he sometimes does stuff with the Orange Empire Museum. I think they renamed recently to some Southern Pacific, whatever. I can't remember. Anyway, but he actually called me and said, do you want this? And I originally said, I'll pass, because I wasn't that big when I had started researching it on it. When I figured out just how rare these damn things were, immediately I was like, wait, I want. He goes, too late, it's up on eBay. I bid $1 on it and I won it. Yeah, he wasn't that happy. And these things usually go from what I've heard from the silver variants and the Bakelite plastic ones. Those are the really big, thick ones. I've actually got one, but it's cracked in half. I'm still working on repairing it. Those go for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So you can just imagine just how much this alone would go for. And I do have it. It's right here in this front case. I'll pass it around once I've gone through all the different artifacts for everyone to see. And there's also some other badges in here, some Dallas Railway and Terminal badges, some of the ones I actually used when I worked there, and so on and so forth. And also I've got physical pictures of some of the stuff that I've been showing here for anyone if they want to read that later on. We can go on the next slide. So there's the actual silver variant right there. This is over in Burleson. And they have the, this one just says Interurban on it. And that one is just a solid brass badge. It doesn't have plating or anything fancy with it. But I know that there's plenty of reproductions of this one. So if you see that, and it's got an itty bitty little stamp on the back, that's the real one. If it doesn't, then it's reproduction, but either way, they are very rare. So let's go on the next slide. And now for what is probably one of the crown jewels of my collection. So this is a South Bend pocket watch. It's not a Studebaker model. Everyone always asks me that. It is not. It is a size 18, not a size 16. But this one specifically, I bought out of McKinney, Texas. And it was actually used by an Interurban operator. I have brought it with me today. It's not the watch that I'm carrying with me. That would be my Elgin that I used back when I was working over at McKinney Avenue in Dallas, not in McKinney, Texas. A lot of people confuse the two. But I do have that with me here today. It's in this little box. And I have it nice and safely wrapped up. And it still works. It's still ticking. And I'll let everyone get a chance to see the inside of it in a bit. But I bought that directly from, there was an antique store there over in McKinney. I forget which one. I think it was one of the big ones, the antique mall or whatever. And when I collect pocket watches. It's one of my side hobbies. And when I had saw that, I was like, oh, I've never seen that one before. I'll take that one. It wasn't being sold for very much. And when I tried to buy it, they wouldn't let me take it home. They said, yeah, you can pay for it, but you got to wait for Mr. So-and-so to come back. And I was like, well, what makes him so damn special? I want it now. And I couldn't immediately take it home with me. And they said, well, no, that's a very special watch. It has historical significance. So I was like, well, does this guy have a phone number? Yes, he does, thankfully. So I was able to get in contact with him later that same day, actually. And he then explained to me that that watch was used by his grandfather on the Interurban. And originally I thought it was just for the Texas Electric. But no, he was actually an operator on the Northern Texas Traction Company. So this watch may very well at one point, inside someone's pocket years ago, may have actually gone through Cleburne on Interurban, which is amazing to think about. I mean, I don't have any direct proof of that, but it's nice to think about.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, and I've only done one thing to this watch since I bought it. You'll notice that there's like a crack up here. There's not a crack on there anymore because I've switched out the glasses. That's like the third crystal it's had in there since that was made. I actually traced it back. This one was made in 1923. So it's almost 100 years old, which is pretty amazing. Oh, forgot to mention, the gold-plated badges were made in about 1907, so that's over 110 years old. So, pretty interesting. Let's go on to the next one. And with that, I would like to thank, of course, the Cleburne Railroad Museum for their time, for allowing me to talk about the Interurban. Even though it's very brief, very short, it's still something worth remembering. I'd also like to thank the North Texas chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, as they're the ones who originally gave me the idea to do a talk about the Interurban. They just didn't expect that it would be here in Cleburne. And then, of course, I am currently the new president of the Northern Texas Traction Club. We recently reestablished. It was originally established back in the mid-90s. It's the main reason why all the cars you see now have been preserved, but they broke up in 2017 due to a bunch of different things, a bunch of really, personally, I would say petty differences, but after going through everything and getting all the paperwork sorted out, I can say with admiration that as of 2022, the Northern Texas Traction Club is back on, and we will hopefully be making more appearances at more museums and places here in North Texas to talk about the interurban history. Also, that would be me, JPD, so this is my personal collection. And then some of the photos, we have the Don Ross collection, so I'd like to shout out them, as well as the Mark Beard collection for that one photo of 330, just 3 miles out. And then, of course, I'd like to thank Johnny J. Myers, because without him, I would not know half of what I know now. He is the OG on all this. He lived through the Interurban. And I think actually his parents were, one of them was the president of the Dallas, Dallas streetcar system. So that's really amazing. And also, I'd like to thank Nick and James for inviting me to do this, because without them, I wouldn't have done this to begin with. So I think we should all give them a big hand. All right, so I think that's it for the slideshow. Now, on to the part that, unfortunately, we cannot put on live stream, but hopefully we'll figure out a way to do this. A lot of people ask me, is there any way that we can get, pictures or anything, or is there any literature on the Interurban? And there is literature on the Interurban, and it would be this. So this is the book written by Johnny J. Myers. You can actually purchase this. It's got a few pieces of outdated information, not a lot, but just a few minor inaccuracies just because of the time of publishing. You can still buy these, and if you go down to the Plano Interurban Museum, you can actually read this completely for free from the Research Center.
And we also have a copy of that you can read. We have it in the back to keep it secure and safe, but if you would like to read it, we do have one that you can come by and read.
And then also, in terms of video media, there's only one, and it is right here. This is the Texas Electric Railway video collage. Almost everything on this was shot by Johnny himself. He filmed it, although the licensing and everything else is done by Steam Gauge Productions, otherwise known as Steve Allen Gowen. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us today. He's recently, I think, released a new book either on the TMP or Cotton Belt. I can't remember which.
I think it was TMB.
Yeah, it was TMP. So that's another amazing book that I would highly recommend reading. In this video, which you can purchase this either directly from website or you can go online and do it. It has well over an hour and a half worth of both color and black and white footage of the Interurban operating. Unfortunately, there's no Northern Texas traction or Southern traction in it. This is strictly Texas Electric from the mid-30s all the way to the closure in 1948. And with that, that's the end of my little spiel. If anyone would like to ask questions and come and see the artifacts up close, you're more than welcome to. Yes?
You said that there is a car 3 miles from here? Where?
No. That picture of 330, that picture was taken 3 miles out of Cleburne on the main line. No, it's not just 3 miles away. If there was, we'd all be taking a field trip to it.
Now, is Johnny doing another book?
Yes, he is doing another book, which I am helping to do stuff with.
Will it have a map of Cleburne?
Uh,
Like his other books?
Unfortunately not. Johnny's next book is on the Dallas Railway and Terminal Company, which is the streetcars that ran in Big D, Dallas. So that's what that's mainly gonna be on. I don't know if it's going to be released this year. I just know that it's still work in progress as of now, but it's going to have a lot of things in it, you know, cars, numbers, and everything, which again, is almost identical to what's in here, only for the streetcars. So that'll be very cool to read. Any other questions?
Is there a map of Cleburne in
The,
existence other than, like he has
Uh,
detailed?
other than what I've
He
seen.
told me he had one, and he was gonna be in the next book he published.
I don't know about that, because I did ask him if he had a more detailed map than what was shown. Didn't give me a direct answer. I also tried contacting the city hall here at Cleburne for records to see if they had anything, but also that came up dry. Well, the maps that I've been able to show you are what's available currently.
I have to, Sanborn insurance maps. There's some online from around the 1900s. I have to get on there for you and see if they show the North Texas traction lines. They don't? Okay. Okay.
Because if we have a 1912 picture of Slash Rogers, and Wilhite Street has tracks going down it.
Okay.
But, you don't see that on any maps.
Not the Sanborn either.
But in the photos, Slash Rogers, you'll see it on Wilhite Street.
Any other questions? No? Okay, well then I guess we can start handing out the little artifacts then that I've got, so.
Thank you, James.
You're certainly welcome. So,
You just start passing.
yeah, just be very careful with
Would
it.
you rather have us?
Would you rather have us come up here and look rather than pass it?
Well, no, I always love it when people get to interact with the objects. It helps. Not to mention, it's not like they're stupid fragile, but it's not gonna break if you sneeze on it. But it's very amazing to see up close and personal.
It is. You have your service pins.
Oh, yeah, those are mine. That's from McKinney Avenue. This is the one that we're focusing on.
Okay.
I keep all my badges in this big box.
Right.
Because it's just easier to transport rather than losing it in a pocket or something like that. And there's the watch.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
So what did that set you back?
$2.
No, so basically when I bought it, the original asking price was like $125 something, and the guy at the time was going through a nasty divorce, but that was on his side of the family, and his wife wanted it from him, but he didn't want to give that to her. She was not entitled to it in any way, and he had tried to get it to different museums in the area, and they all didn't express any interest. They said, yeah, we'll take it, but we won't display it.
That's terrible.
So what I told him was, look, if I buy it, I'm going to make sure that goes on display somewhere, or I'm going to bring it out and show it to people. You have my word on that. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years now, which is pretty amazing. And I will open it
Go ahead.
if you want to see
Go
it.
ahead.
Yeah, so again, this
I
is a
don't wanna
railroad
handle it,
watch,
try.
so the way that you'd open it, it's not like you can set the time by pulling that out or anything, that just doesn't do nothing. What you have to do is you have to unscrew the front bezel, like so, and you notice it's got a very thick piece of glass in it, that's so that way they can rattle around in your pocket without breaking. So, take that off, like so. Now that we've already pulled that out, just want to make sure, this is what we call a swing out case. So there's a little indent right there where I can fit my nail. Very gently pull her up. There's the inside, still sticking. Now, of course, when I got it, there were a few things full of rust in it, but I went and I cleaned everything except for the set screws. I couldn't get those quite to shine,
Right.
but
21 joules?
it should be 21 joules. It's so small I can hardly read it. Especially.
You're young.
Well, no, it's
You're
easier to
young.
read it if it doesn't, you notice how it's got that nice
I
pattern
understand,
on
but
it?
you're young. Not that young?
So-
21. At least I hope.
So on the railroad watches,
Yeah.
you know about bids than I do. I thought that whenever they would calibrate them, they would make a little description in the case to indicate. Is it on there?
There should, yep, there's one right there. It's very small, but there is a calibration mark in there.
Wow.
And that's in an Alaskan silver case. So I don't know what percentage silver it is, but I know that they go for an arm and a leg on eBay. So,
Well, I
Yeah.
just handled it enough. Let me give it back to you.
of course, let me show that up to the camera just so that everyone can see that. It's very nice, very pretty. And then let me put this back down. Anyway, so as for setting it, if I can put that back in there. The lever is right here, it's right just after the 2, and if I pull that out like so, I can now set the watch to whatever I need it to be, moving the arm up and down. I'm doing that just ever so slightly, I still want it to be more or less on time. And then once I have it set, usually you'd go to the big clock in the middle of the station, and you'd be there crack of dawn, and of course everyone else would be around and be like, okay, we'll set our watches at the same time, and then once they're all set, you put it back together, put it in your pocket, and off you go. Some railroads were very, very, what's the word, I would say, persnickety about it, because some of them went as far as putting a little paper tab inside once you've set it for like a certain amount of time. And if they found that little paper seal broken, they would deduct about half your pay for that. For having to do that, because the only way that you could modify or do anything to it, you had to send it off to the watchmakers that were approved, or the jewelers, I should say, that were approved by the railroad.
I think we have a watchman's clock that uses the same concept that was worked at the shops. It's much bigger, but uses the same paper traction that you're talking about.
Anyway, there's mine right there, my daily carry. This was my first railroad watch. It was an Elgin, and it's in this nice nickeloid case. And it's got a train on the back of it. You don't usually see that on railroad watches. As you see, this one's pretty bland on the back, and that's on purpose. It's just a timekeeping instrument. You're never supposed to goggle at it. You look at it, you put it away, and that's it.
The watch was so important because you had the time beats.
Yep.
And if your watch is off by even a minute, that could make a difference between being on the side of your time or having it head on.
Yes, and sadly enough, there were a couple of head-on collisions that were caused by inadequate timing on the railroad. That was more during Texas Electric's time rather than the Northern Texas Traction. But there was a photo, I had debated on putting it on. There's a photo of one that split a switch because it was coming in so fast that the adjacent crew didn't have time to switch the track. So it came through, jumped over it, split, and it smashed into a telephone pole. And that, I think actually that picture's in here, so we can look it up real quick. Let's see if I can find it.
Now, do you have the pull-away maps in that book?
I don't have the maps with them.
But you don't have
But
them?
I do have them.
You have them, okay.
Yeah. You can get them for like nothing
Yeah.
over at the Plano Interurban Museum. They've got stacks of them, which is really, really handy because I've misplaced mine twice.
Oh.
So I had to go back and find them. There's a inside version of what those cars would have looked like, which is pretty
I
amazing.
guess that's a smoky chair.
Yes, this is the smoking lounge.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Now, that was the Crimson, that was only in the Crimson, right?
The Crimson Limiteds did have
That's-
smoking rooms.
but that's what-
But there was a service that ran into Cleburne. They had a Cleburne Limited, oddly enough. It was very short-lived. It's almost never mentioned. I only found maybe one article mentioning it. It was like nothing. It was just, hey, come ride this, and that was it. But I know that the Cleburne Limiteds, one of them offered a non-smoking split car, which was interesting. I think that's kind of why it went out of fashion so quick, because what's the use of going on it if you couldn't have a smoke? Because that was part of the main appeal, I'm guessing, of.
But there should be some articles in the Times Review of the Crimson when they, came down here to Davy Crockett. They talked about it and promoted it.
Yep. I believe
They
that
haven't
is.
finished scanning them all. It'll be easy to search.
Or easier.
Yeah, well,
Still grow cross-eyed. Oh.
Oh, yeah.
I can't tell you how many times that happened.
right.
Yeah.
Now, I actually have a miniature version of this little sign that says, "The Home Interurban." I've got one of those at my house. It's a bit smaller though, it's not quite as big, but yeah, that's the.
Now, is that neon?
No. This is, I don't believe this is a neon sign, this is before that.
Yeah.
Just
I noticed
before
the
that.
same
The one I have is a flat painted one. I wish I had a neon sign, that would be real pretty.
Our reflectors, the beaded reflectors.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm too old to do that. Gotta give me a big magnifying glass.
Can you get my readers out?
Good to see you, Dan.
Y'all have a good one.
Take care.
See ya, Dan.
I know it's in here somewhere that it shows that wreck. Because I don't like dog-earing pages on there.
No,
Sure.
never.
It is very, very. There she is, that's the one. There it is. So you can see
Yeah.
it jump the switch and it smashed right into it.
Ooh.
Yeah, very, very bad. You can see the other car there, and he's all bent out of shape. He got smashed because of that too.
Right, because of the pole hit him.
Yeah, he went, knocked it over, knocked it over.
Wow.
Just so that everyone at home can look at it. I don't know if it's still recording or
It
not.
is. It
I hope
is
it
right
is.
off.
But there's the wreck for you.
Because it was turned around here.
Again, you can get it in this book right here.
Courthouse.
Yeah, North Main, so we were right here.
Yeah, so it came
Came right
around
here.
the courthouse, down to, because the Liberties,
I think the Liberty's right here, and then.
yeah, and it went behind, because the photograph that we were looking at, that we have as well,
Mhm,
as here would be the train,
mhm.
because we could see the courthouse in the background on the other side of the Liberty.
I've also got some original negatives.
Isn't there a tiny section of track that's visible in the pavement? In that area?
I don't know if there still is. There used to be a lot more, but according to Myers, most of that got ripped up.
I think it all got covered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, as most of it just got paved over.
But I think there's a little, they may have paved it back over again,
There was
but
a little place
a
you
little
could
place you
see.
can see the rails, yeah.
But,
Oh, now this is a former Northern Texas traction car. I think. Yep, it is.
what is this?
That is a freight engine. So in the 1920s, Texas Electric moved to doing freight. So all the other interurban companies, they were smart. When they first established themselves, they had two branches, passengers and freight. When Texas Electric started, I believe they only ever did passengers for the first couple of years.
Wait a minute, we could be making more money.
And that was more due to restrictions, I believe. I know it's mentioned in the book that once they got some clearances through, they were able to actually start doing freight operations. And what they originally had, they basically would take disused cars like this one, they would take them, hollow them out, turn them into boxcars. Well, the difference, well, it's good, but you can't run a train behind it. It's just a unit.
Right.
That's where these guys come in. This is a Class A freight motor.
And so it hauls just conventional freight cars.
Yep, it holds freight cars or the interurban box cars. There's a bunch of them in there.
If you go to San Antonio, to the Pearl Brewery, the old Pearl Brewery,
They have a Class
those-
B.
They have a Class B freight motor serving from the old stations.
The only difference between a B and an A The A's got 3 windows in the center, and it's got big trucks.
Yes.
The B's basically have the trucks that would come off of an Interurban car, but they just had the body of this, but they didn't have 3 windows in them. They just had the 2 on the edges, which is very nice. Let me just show that for everybody to see at
Was
home.
that, which traction company was it that went through here?
North Texas
It
Traction.
was North Texas.
Yes.
Okay, because you know, there's the house there that belonged to, I can't remember what his name was.
All right. And with that,
It's still there.
I think we've brought all this to a nice close. Hope to see you all down the line.
Okay, it is still there, and it belongs to some people that sent their kids to the same school I did.
Not exactly. I'm just gonna re-upload that probably.